Welcome back to Getting Down to Business, the podcast dedicated to helping dentists effectively navigate their practice every step of the way. On the show today, we have Rachel Robles, our valuation analyst, taking us on a deep dive into some common misconceptions around the topic of valuations. Whether you're buying or selling a business, knowing the fair market value is crucial to ensure you maximize your profit. But before we get started with that, if you haven't already, go ahead and smash that like button for the YouTube algorithm. And if you've watched 2 or more of our episodes and aren't subscribed yet, my question to you is, why not? Give that subscribe button a smash as well, and let's get down to business.
On today's episode of Getting Down to Business, we're going to be talking about practice valuations. It's a subject that we have many videos on. We keep talking about it because it's a very important, relevant issue that dentists and business owners need to know about. It isn't taught in school. I wasn't even aware of what a valuation was until I started working with the Hindley Bergmeyer Group. And I've owned a business for several years now. I'm excited to have on our all-star team. We've got Rachel Robles, who really does the under-the-hood work when it comes to the valuations. She's the one crunching the numbers, looking at all of the numbers, looking at all of the details. And of course, we have Kelly, who is on the front lines talking to the business owners that are looking to get the valuations and keeping things cool with them. There's probably more than a few misconceptions that you could talk about when it comes to valuations. What are some of the misconceptions that lead to misunderstandings or decision makings when it comes to dental practice valuations? What are, in your opinion, we'll just say the top 5 common misconceptions around valuations?
Sure. I think there's probably a lot more than 5. We would say one of the most common misconceptions are that all practices are valued the same way. We have a lot of clients that come to us either for a valuation of their own business or a due diligence valuation, and their basic understanding is that the value is just some percentage of revenue. And while we would consider a value as a percentage of revenue a valuation method, the misconception is that all practices are valued using that method, and that is untrue. When we are valuing a dental practice or any other small business that we may be valuing, we use several valuation methods and then determine which of those are appropriate for the specific business being valued. The idea that value is solely based on revenue has to be a misconception, because based on the example that we always give, Kelly, I know I always say this, but if you are valuing 2 identical practices that provide the same services, they're in the same location, maybe they're even on the same block, they have the same amount of revenue, both of them generate $1 million a year. If one of them has a profit of 40%, and the other has profit of $1, would we argue that they're worth the same? No, of course they're not, because one is worth $1 and the other has 40% profit. So if we were arguing that value is solely based on revenue, then you would say that both of those practices are worth the same. And so that right there is our explanation of why that is a misconception. If you went in to weigh those 2 practices and you did not look at profit, and you only looked at top line revenue, and you picked the one with $1 profit because maybe you thought their front office is prettier, or whatever was the reason that you chose, because you didn't know that, you would be
So misconception number 1 is that it's a one size fit all. We use the same method for every practice. That's not true. What sorts of things dictate which approach you take?
There's always this factor that goes into every single valuation, no matter what the practice is like, no matter what industry we're in. It doesn't matter, where we're going to say, it depends. Eric would say it's the human element. It's the human element of what is going on in that practice at the time that we're valuing it, or over the time, the years that we're analyzing, what was happening in that practice that would affect the final value. We may have to take things into consideration like, has the business moved? If in the last 3 years they moved to another location and now they have double the number of operatories, or in the last 6 months, the owner had some kind of medical emergency, and so their production has dropped off immediately, but now they're on their way back. Or there's all kinds of situations that can play into the calculation of value, and us as the professional have, professional discretion to determine what all and to what degree certain things have an impact on the value. All practices are not valued the same way for multiple reasons on multiple levels.
So Rachel, let me ask you a question. I have a dental practice and I own my own building. I just got an offer on my building probably a month ago, and I'm in the process of selling it. But so I need to value my practice. It's like I have somebody that's purchasing the building that's not purchasing the practice, but I need, because of the fact that I want to sell both, and it just happened to be that the building is going to sell before the practice. How is that going to affect my value on my practice?
Valuation of the business does not take into consideration the ownership of the property, because we see lots of practice owners who do own the property that they're practicing out of, and then lots of owners that don't. And when we're valuing a business, it does not depend at all on who owns the building. For the expense related to rent of the building, we always represent a fair market value. So if you own the building and you're paying yourself rent, or maybe you own the building and you're not paying yourself rent, or if you don't own the building and you're paying rent to someone else, we always will get an opinion of that property's fair market value to represent a true expected ongoing expense for operating in that space.
What if the new owners of the building don't want me to stay on as a renter? Does that affect my value of my business?
Yes, because say you didn't sell your business before you actually had to move out. The period that you go, okay, I have to move out in January, and so January comes and goes, and now I'm out of the old space. All my stuff, I'm paying storage. All my stuff is in a storage building because I haven't signed a lease on a new space yet. The period of time that you go without practicing, that you have no income, yes, that would impact your business, because you're probably losing patients during that time. You're not bringing on any new patients during that time. Your production, your collections for the 12-month period, you're going to have a dip in that, whether it's a few weeks or a month or however long it takes you to get established into a new location. Also, when we're assessing risk factors for a business, we look at things like, how long have you been in business, number one. How long have you been in the same location, number two. So if you've been in the same location for like 10 years or more, there's like, your risk goes way down for that. Whereas if you've moved very recently, or even if you opened your business only in the last few years, there's a lot higher risk for that, because you don't have as much of an established patient base. If you are going to sell your practice, you want to know that your lease is transferable.
All right.
So if we move from practices are valued the same way to value is solely based on revenue, the next one would be valuations are fixed and unchanging, meaning that at whatever point we decide to value your business, that is the value, that is the value, that is the value. And for multiple reasons, it always depends. The value can change over time. The value can change immediately. The value can change overnight. We know that the value changes because, operating your business, things change over time, right? We like to see your profitability go up. We like to see your revenue go up. whenever we do value a practice and then put your practice on the market, we tell you don't slow down. You know, it can take 9 months or even 12 months or, you know, hopefully not longer than that, but sometimes longer than that to sell your business. And throughout that time, different prospective buyers are going to want to see your current financials, and you want your current status to point back to our valuation. You know, if we value your practice at $1 million, and then you're like, "Whew, thank goodness I've worked so hard and I got the $1 million price tag that I was looking for, and I put my practice on the market. Now I can finally relax." And then you start working 2 days instead of 4 days, and your production goes down and the value goes down with it. So it's really important to maintain all the same things that you did during the, you know, before and leading up to your valuation, that you maintain that so that your value does stay the same. Or if I valued your business today and you told me I want to sell in 3 to 5 years, I want to be in the best position possible, we would point out, here are some areas that could use improvement that you will see an increase in your practice value in the 3 to 5 years, you know, leading up to when you actually want to put your business on the market. So no, a valuation is not fixed and unchanging. It's the current value of your business.
Maybe give us a couple scenarios. Scenario one is I got my valuation early. I'm not even ready to sell. I think I can kind of answer that question on my own. Would be when I am ready to sell, we would get the valuation renewed, or we would redo it. But what if, you know, it's for sale? I got the valuation. Is it just like, yeah, how often should I consider redoing that value?
So evaluation is based on historical financials. So if we used, say, 5 years of financials, the most recent year is going to have the most impact on your value, but a wide range of financials, you know, a wider time period, recalculating your value after 2 months is not going to change anything. If you move to a larger office and you had twice the number of operatories and you have a significant bump in production because you have so much more opportunity to see more patients.
Right.
Again, it's based on historical information. Now we've introduced the idea that your practice is potentially worth a lot more because you have a lot more opportunity than you had in your old location. So again, professional judgment on what we're going to let have more or less impact on the value. I would argue that it's almost like valuing two different businesses. If you make a significant operating change, like now my office is twice as big, every business that's valued, you have to look into all the things that make that business specific, right? That's the reason why we don't just slap a percentage of revenue. That doesn't have anything to do with the specific practice being valued, and that's unfair.
I mean,
Yes.
everybody's different. People are different how they pay their staff. People I tried to look at trends. I remember one time I was trying to pull some trends for a client that wanted to know, like, what is the standard pay rate for hygienists? And we don't just look at pay rates when we look at stuff like that. We look at what is their hourly rate, what are their benefits, do they have a 401k contribution, or is the practice making a contribution toward their health insurance? And then we look at the total cost. Like, this is what different practices are doing, and they are all different. One practice will offer holiday pay and they'll offer 10 holidays, where some will only offer 4. Then you have another one that does, does a employer match on their health insurance. And then you have another one that offers 401k, and maybe they pay you don't have to even contribute to the 401k. They make the contribution for you through the practice. So when you look at stuff like that, and they're so vastly different from one another, they could all be making in the same, like the revenue could be coming in at the same rate and the same amounts.
Kelly, are you typically getting a surprise reaction when you talk about these things with your clients? Or are they kind of
Like
knowledgeable?
sometimes, like there are a few clients that really appreciate it, and they're like, okay, because the thing is with us is that we do charge a fee. We charge a fee to do the valuation. And with so many of our competitors doing it for free, we have to really explain why we charge a fee. Not so much why, this person doesn't, but why we do. And we really do something that's like outlined for that practice. It is specifically for them. It's not just a generalization of this is, these are the percentages and they fall in the percentages, so your value is this. And so I think that some people are like, oh, they don't want to pay for the valuation because they feel like they can get it for free somewhere else. But just know that your valuation that you're getting for free somewhere else, a potential buyer is probably asking us to do due diligence, and we're going to value your practice the way that we would if you were paying us. So if you were valued by one of our competitors, a broker that's a competitor that has valued your practice a certain way and inflated your value, and we come back with the buyer and say it is only worth this much, and there may be a difference, just know that could happen.
And so it's more likely to be inflated because they're just using a percentage of revenue, and they're not digging deep
using a percentage of
into
revenue. They could be
the nuts and bolts.
they could be taking more discretionary expenses than what should be taken.
Once you get the valuation, or the client does, and they have it in mind that, their practice is worth this much money, do they go ahead and usually list at that amount? Or do they try to list a little bit higher? Or can you walk us through what happens after they get the valuation and they actually try to sell it? Do those numbers stay the same?
Rachel, when she does the valuation, she'll do the valuation as of a certain point in time. So she'll do it like, let's just say, well, we're pretty much, halfway through this year. So if she does a valuation for this year, she probably will do a valuation as of 2024. But let's just say it's in February. She'll do a valuation as of December 2023, right? And that's that she goes over that with the client. They usually will say, after they go back and forth a little bit on, oh, I forgot to give you this. And oh, just to mention, this is a one-time expense you have. Why is this so high? And Rachel's like, well, because I see it in there and there was no response to my clarification letter on that one. So I had to leave it there. And they're like, no, that is, there's a little bit of going back and forth on trying to get some clarification on expenses. And once that is set in stone and that is done, at the time that they're saying, okay, here's the value, now I want to sell it, they usually sell it for what the value is. Like if Josh, if you were a client coming in and you had an idea of what your practice is worth, and you're like, okay, I know that I generate $2.4 million in production, so I'm thinking that my practice is going to be around 1.8 million or whatever. And Rachel comes back and says, well, actually it's 1.4 million. And you're like, but I want 1.8 because that's what's in my head. You can always list it for 1.8.
So I can ask for 1.8.
You can ask for 1.8. But when someone comes to us, like a buyer comes to us and says, well, I've done my due diligence and I see that it's only worth 1.4, we have to say to that person, well, you're taking that risk. Like if you really want that practice, either that, or we try to negotiate with the seller and say, well, the potential buyer did come in at 1.4 where we came in at our value. What do you want to do? And if the seller says, well, I still want 1.8, then we have to, say, yes, your value came in at this at 1.4, but it's up to you on how you want to, because I'm going to guarantee you, I probably shouldn't guarantee, but I see this so much, a bank will probably lend 1.8.
A bank may not take into consideration that your lifestyle requires a certain amount of income for yourself, the practicing doc. They know that they're going to get paid first. You'll elect not to pay yourself before you won't pay the bank. So, and the dental industry is super low risk. So it's a lot easier to get a 100% loan for a dental practice than lots of other industries. So the bank wants to do the loan for you, right? Like they're in the business of making money also. They want to give you the loan. They want to make that interest payment off of you. So they want it to go through. Us, on the other hand, we're looking for reasonability. Does it make sense to sell it at 1.8 versus 1.4? And that goes into our ultimate decision of what the value is, and how we got to 1.4. Maybe that meant that the owner wasn't going to get to pay themselves whatsoever, and that would be unreasonable. Also, when we are calculating value, not typically for the dental practice as much does this come up. But for other industries, we have a value based on EBITDA, which most people know what EBITDA is, earnings before interest, taxes, depreciation, amortization. Those are discretionary expenses that are for the owner, not operating expenses. Those are non-operating expenses. And then we also have the same calculation where it's based on SDE, which stands for seller's discretionary earnings. EBITDA considers payment to the professional, and SDE does not. We call it return to labor. So when we're doing a dental practice, return to labor is what it costs to pay the operating dentist, versus SDE means that you don't consider the payment to the professional at all. If the owner operator, the dentist, chooses not to operate their business, they have to pay another professional. They have to pay another dentist. So we always use a return to labor as a percentage of production, and we represent that as a necessary expense. We covered valuation equals sale price. That is a misconception. The calculated value, our opinion of value, is without any influence on seller motivation, buyer motivation, anything like that. There's not a gun to anybody's head. This is what the business would go for on the open market. Asking price or sale price is under the influence of the seller or the buyer, right? Like the example of 1.8 where our value is 1.4. The buyer is more than welcome to pay 1.8. They can pay 2 million. They can pay 3 million. They can pay whatever they want to pay if they can write the check for it and the bank agrees to fund it. No problem. But it's not our opinion of value, and us as the valuator will not justify a value that's above our calculation. So if our opinion of value is 1.4 and you want to sell it for 1.8, and a potential buyer asks us to justify that value, we won't do it. That would be unethical. So we can only justify a value that falls into the range that we calculate. Last one is equipment and physical assets are the most important. We disagree on this. Equipment and physical assets are important. However, they are not the most important. Your intangible assets most of the time make up the majority of the value of your business. Your intangible assets are an established patient base, your trained workforce, your awesome reputation in the community. All these things help you to maintain the same business as usual. Whereas if we were to say that the majority of your value comes from just your equipment, the value of your practice would be significantly less. In some cases, it depends. In some cases, your equipment and physical assets are most important, but in those cases, it's typically when you have an emergency situation where we need to do what we call like a fire sale or a liquidation, where we're literally liquidating your practice to get what we can out of your tangible assets because you're closing up shop today. We're not trying to transfer patients, nothing like that. It's literally just the price of your physical assets. We valued a practice where the dentist had lots of additional equipment, more than maybe what was required to do regular business operations. And so he felt that added to his practice value, where we said, if you have more equipment than what is necessary, that's not going to increase the value of your practice, but you may be able to sell the additional equipment on the side. The value of the practice is the value of the practice, and you can say plus the value of additional equipment, or you could sell the equipment
And
on
the additional equipment, most of the additional equipment was items that new dentists that would possibly purchase his practice really didn't, I don't want to say knew how to use, but it wasn't important to them because they weren't using it.
Yeah.
So
just because
so it really doesn't have value. It wouldn't have value to the prospective buyer because they don't use that equipment.
Yeah. So just because you've stockpiled equipment doesn't mean that your practice is valued higher because you have more tangible assets than the guy next door. Because your goodwill is not affected by the amount of equipment that you have. Values based solely on revenue, I think that's an easy misconception, not because people maybe believe that 100% of their value is based on revenue, but because they think that is a steadfast benchmark. Well, I know that my practice is worth 70% of revenue, and if I make 100, if I generate $1 million a year, then I want 750. That's what I want. And without consideration at all to other factors such as profitability, they may be, surprised.
Thank you for joining us on today's episode of Getting Down to Business. Don't forget to pick up your copy of Norton Hindley's amazing book, Getting Down to Business. Check the link in the description. And if you're a business owner with questions about buying or selling a practice and would like to get some more information, please visit our website at www.hindleybergmeyergroup.com. That's HINDLEYBURGMAIERGROUP.com, where you can schedule a free consultation with Kelly Yardman and someone from our amazing team. We'll see you next time.